Welcome to the Go Big with Gib podcast, a place for professionals, business owners, and entrepreneurs to talk about their big wins. So folks, welcome to the Go Big with Gib podcast. Today we've got a very, very special guest with us. We've got Brandon Cobb with us. Brandon, how are you today?
Man, I'm fantastic. I'm here with you.
Man, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today. Brandon, go ahead and give our listeners a brief introduction. Tell us a little bit about you, your background and experience.
So medical device rep turned real estate developer. We do about $22 million in new construction annually with a focus on entry-level, first-time homebuyer housing. So build to sell communities that we invent from scratch and, trying to work on this build to rent model. Came from a background that had nothing to do with real estate. I got fired from my job doing medical device sales, had no desire whatsoever to get into real estate. I love what I did. Young kid in his 20s wearing scrubs every single day, getting to rub shoulders with orthopedic surgeons, train hospital staff. My products are changing lives. I did not have any desire for entrepreneurship or getting into real estate. I don't consider myself a natural entrepreneur. But that day when I got fired, I learned that nobody was going to look out for my financial well-being but me. And now I'm on this journey to help other business owners and W-2 employees alike to create their own financial freedom, using real estate. Very similar to what you guys do with Go Big with Gibbs.
Yeah. No. That's fascinating. So the medical device sales, let's go back to that a little bit because I love to hear where people came from, I started out, as an attorney, as you know, and eventually found my way into real estate. You started with medical device sales. Was that a natural transition for you? Like, is there anything about what you did before in the medical device sales that translated over to make you a successful real estate investor and operator?
Yeah, specifically sales. So medical device sales took me several years to break into, and it is a very cutthroat, very competitive industry. There's a lot of guys that are chasing doctors' businesses because there's a lot of money in the healthcare industry. And I took that same level, my edge that I had and what made me successful in medical device sales. And when I came over to real estate, I was more or less doing more business to consumer sales, not, B2B, chasing other doctors. And the bar was a lot lower. For example, when I would go on these appointments with sellers, because that's really what my niche was. I did not have the project management experience. I didn't have a lot of the experience, doing like marketing. Those were some things that I was learning. I had to cut my teeth in. I had to figure out. But sales is really where I excelled. So I was able to go on these appointments and really build deep rapport and relationships very quickly with these consumers because that's what I was required to do with these surgeons. Right? The guys who succeed in medical device sales are the guys that can build deep, long-lasting relationships very quickly and learn how to add value really quickly, not just with the surgeons, but with the hospital staff, the OR coordinators, and the administrators that basically run those individual surgery centers and hospitals. So I came from a very complex, very highly competitive world to this world where I'm calling on consumers. It's one-on-one. I've got immediate access. And when you do little things like, leave a handwritten thank you card in the mailbox right after leaving that appointment, or you're just doing your job of consistently following up in unique ways, not, hey, did you get my message? But, hey, we talked about how you needed, this thing for your daughter. She was trying to find financing. Like, hey, here's this program that I found that it works for this school. You might want your daughter to reach out to them. Coming up with very unique ways to follow up. That's following up, but not with the sales center focused. Those little things really helped me. Sales is one of those things where I love what Brian Tracy said about this. He compared it to being a racehorse. The first place racehorse makes about 17 times more money than the second place racehorse. But if you look at how much better that first place racehorse is than the second place racehorse, on average, it wins by fractions of a second. Fractions of a second. So you don't have to be levels and levels better than your competition to be number one. I just need to be a little bit better. So doing those little things, handwritten thank you cards, creative follow-up, going and knocking on the door if you're in the area, all those things really allowed me to start winning contracts and winning the business of those sellers, as opposed to my competition that didn't come from the same hyper competitive background in sales.
Yeah. So now in your real estate, sphere, in this new role that you have, I know you've been doing real estate for a long time, but who are you? So you're going to sellers, like you're talking about reaching out to sellers of existing properties or land, because I know you do a lot of ground up development.
Mm-hmm.
Is that who you're talking about when you're talking about, building these deep, long lasting relationships that you did, in your prior career? Is that who you're targeting? Is the sellers of these pieces of property that you want to acquire?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Today, it's not me doing it. We've got a sales team. But back when I was first getting started, we started at heart flipping houses and, flipping some pieces of land. Very small transactions, right? Onesie, twosie stuff. Not the stuff where, we're doing, 50, 100, 200 units like we are today and rezoning that land, working with the cities, identifying their vision and helping work on the same side of the table as the cities to help bring that vision to life in the community. So it's at a much higher level. But when I was starting out, I was the guy going literally house to house, appointment setting, or getting that phone call to go show up on that appointment and get that house to flip and make money. And that house flipping business eventually morphed into a home building business that eventually morphed into a development business.
Sure. So talk to me about, the development business, and like you talked about $22 million annually. How did that come about to where you decided, man, I want to do this on such a big stage?
Yeah, it was kind of funny. The growth happened a lot quicker than I originally thought. When we were building houses, I was raising money from investors. One, I ran out all my own money, right? Real estate has a knack of doing that. It can soak up every single dollar you got when you're going out, especially when you're doing new construction. So we had a need to bring on additional investors. I was raising dollar for dollar. And what that means is if I had a home that I wanted to buy the land for $50,000 and put $250 in it to build the home, so $300,000 on, I had to go find a $300,000 investor. And typically we were paying, 10 to 12% as a promissory note. And we'd build that home, we'd sell them, and they would get paid back. So these investors were basically the bank on our deals. And at the time we had built that up, I think I'd raised somewhere around $4 or $5 million. I had $4 or $5 million going, had my own money going, my partner's money going in there, and we were struggling to scale. And I was like, dude, to get to doing the volume that I want to do, like I've got to go out and I've got to raise 20, 30, $40 million, and holy crap, it's going to take forever. And it's like playing Tetris with people's money, right? You've got to have the perfect opportunity with the right amount of capital that the investor has, because you don't want multiple investors in a second, third, fourth position in these homes. It just gets too complicated. And I was introduced to this model called the syndication, where you could pull investors' funds together, and you could use that as an equity partnership to then take that equity and leverage to go get bank debt. Well, Gibbs, when I found this out and I went to my investors and I looked at what I could do with the deal, and I told investors, like, guys, I'm looking at the numbers on what we could do here. If we could just take this $4 or $5 million, convert it into equity, I can go get another $20 million in debt, and we can go and really explode this thing. And that's exactly what we did. So I literally went to bed one night with $4 or $5 million in investor partnership relations and woke up with $20 million. And that's how this whole thing really started to escalate into what it's become today.
Wow. So yeah, that's fascinating, like the growth that you've experienced in such a short period of time. I mean, you said it happened a lot faster than you expected, and the syndication model really was the key to that, it sounds like,
Yep. I had no idea that you could turn that debt with your investors into equity and then leverage that to go get, debt from banks. And, it was great because we were able to, take the returns from 10 to 12% and give them a nice, healthy boost.
Wow, that's incredible. So how long have you been doing the development side of things?
Yeah, so the development side, we've been doing it for, since 2021, late 2021, somewhere around there. So about 2.5, roughly 3 years.
Okay. And so tell me a little bit about, what markets you're focused on. I know you're located in Nashville, Tennessee. Are you building right there in your local area?
Yeah, so we focus on Middle Tennessee, right around Nashville. We'll go about 45 minutes from downtown proper, and specifically in areas where we can invent and create first-time homebuyer housing. Right now, 33% of the home buying population, specifically millennials, they are chasing less than 10% of the homes being built. So there's a huge supply and demand imbalance there that we're trying to capitalize on. So we're in those neighborhoods that we can build that type of product. We want to be a newer home that's at or below the median home price, competing against older homes.
Sure. I mean, that's when you're competing like that, you've got a tremendous advantage, right? When you're a brand new product. Talk to me a little bit about what your development would look like. So we talking about single family, multifamily, and what size are we talking about here? Give me a little bit more detail on what a typical development might look like for you.
Yeah, so our strategy is built around 3 primary exit strategies because, we've got 600-700 units in the pipeline. I'm not going to build 700 homes. There's absolutely no way that's going to happen. I don't have the capacity, nor do I have the capital to do that. So we've got 3 exit strategies, but everything is built on this premise that we work with the cities, we identify the parcels that are not the highest and best use, and then we force appreciate that land by adding density through rezoning it from 1 or 2 homes to 100 homes. And then once we've entitled it, which is get all the approvals in place, we can do one of 3 things. One is we can buy it and flip it to another developer after all the value has been there, kind of similar to multifamily, right? You go in, you renovate the units, you increase the value of the asset through the net operating income and sell it. We force appreciate it through that rezone process. We can then just sell the paper to another developer who wants to develop it, and that can be single family, it can be commercial, it can be multifamily, it could be retail strip centers, it could be industrial. We're not limited by what we can do with it. Again, depends on the zoning in the area. Primarily, the bulk of what we've done in the past is single family. So that's exit strategy number 1. Exit strategy number 2 is we can go and then create a syndication with investors if needed to then develop the land, put all the roads, utilities, water, sewer, all the infrastructure in, and we're usually selling that to an end builder or an end buyer that wants to develop land. And the cool thing about that is you've already got your exit strategy lined up. That's exit strategy number 2. And then exit strategy number 3 is we do the building ourselves and we take it all the way through and we sell it.
Wow. Yeah, I like how you've got those different options. Talk to me a little bit about the zoning and entitlement phase of things. We're doing my company is doing some ground up development in Phoenix, Arizona. You and I have spoken about that when I was a guest on your podcast. But for the listeners, I know folks say that there's a lot of risk, in the zoning and entitlement phase. Are you putting up a lot of at-risk capital and how do you gauge what is a good risk and what is maybe not a risk worth taking?
Yeah. So in my opinion, there's a number 1 rule in development that you never forget, and that is you don't buy it until all your improvements are in there. So I've talked with some guys in California that do exactly what you just said. They're kind of gambling and hoping that they get the approvals. We never do that. So we're under contract with the seller with a contingent upon an outcome. And so, yes, we do risk the money to do all the civil and everything, but that's just the cost of doing business. It's $40,000, $50,000. Maybe if it's like a 200 home development, it might be $70,000, $80,000, $90,000, something like that. So we get all the approvals in place, and then we're able to purchase it. But before we spend any money on it, when we go under contract with the seller, we'll pay a civil engineer maybe $3,000 to create a concept plan, and we take that concept plan to the city and we say, hey, we just want to make sure that we can get a verbal from you guys. Is this what y'all want? Now, remember, we've already gone to them ahead of time and met with them and understood their needs and what they want to create. So we know and have a pretty good chance of getting the approvals in place because we've already sat down with them and said, this is what you want? Okay, we're going to go get it. And so very unlikely they're going to change their mind. But after they give you the verbal and they're like, yes, you've met with at least the majority of the planning commission and they've said, yes, I would definitely love to see this in the community. You've got my vote. Now you can pay that civil engineer to start designing the development and paying them. And so while you're doing this, you can go and find a developer buyer to buy it once it's done, or you can go find your builder to go and say, hey, I want to sell this to you and develop it once it's done, or you can make plans to do it yourself and kind of get investors ready once it's done. But you don't really want to buy it until you have all of your horizontal costs. And so it's kind of this chicken before the egg. You don't know what your horizontal costs are going to be until you have final civil drawings. They're called CDs. You want final CD approval from the state and the city. Once you have that, now you can bid everything out and you can go and finalize your cost. Now, as a developer, if you've done enough of these, you have a pretty good idea of what you're going to spend. I'm going like, all right, I know it's not going to cost us more than, $60,000 per pad to develop this. Like I'm shooting high. Like I've never had something cost that much before. And so as a good rule of thumb, if it pencils at that or we're close, I know that this is worth pursuing because I know based on experience what it's cost to do things. But that's the rule. Never buy anything until all your approvals are in place with the city and the state, and then you can buy it.
So yeah, let's break that down a little bit, Brandon. And so you've got a piece of land, and you go under contract on the land with the contingency that if you are able to get the proper zoning and entitlements, then you will purchase the land. Correct?
That's right.
And then you hire a civil engineer to come in and do like a preliminary review. Like I think you talked about, like they're going to give an opinion, right, on what would need to be done, so that you could then take that to the city and see if that's something that seems in line with what they want to do. Is that accurate?
They literally do a concept plan. They're just drawing something to present to the city. Hey, look, let's put an apartment on here. Let's put a housing community. Let's put an industrial center. Whatever the zoning allows for, right? And you're just presenting that to the city. Very quick, very easy.
Okay. And if the city were to say that's a no-go, then basically how much money are you out at that point on a typical transaction?
$2,000 or $3,000.
Okay. And if you get the thumbs up from the city, then you go ahead and you begin. Is that when you would start doing the engineering work?
Yeah, that's when you're going to start spending some money with the civil engineer, designing the sewer, the water, the grading plan, everything that goes into designing the development.
Okay. And then do you typically take care of all the horizontal construction at that point? Is that typically part of your, game plan, that you're going to handle that yourself?
So we look at that as exit strategy number 2. So it just depends on how much money we've got available and how much how much capacity we have. If I'm building 30, 40 homes and developing 150 pads, I'm tapped, right? So I would then lean on exit strategy number 1, which is I would get that land approved, and during that process, I would be going and looking for another developer, right? I'd be talking to that civil engineer who's designing stuff for all the other guys. Hey, anybody who wants to buy this? And because it takes about a year to get these approvals in place. It's you got to build your pipeline. It's not a quick process, so you have plenty of time to go line up and in buyer for it if you need to, or that's the exit strategy that you want to pursue. So that's exit strategy number 1, is just selling the paper. I'm all in it for 50 to 100 grand in civil fees at that point. And then, if I have to, I can, if I can't find a buyer, and I know this is a really good deal, I can, syndicate funds from investors. I can buy it, I can hold it, or I could develop it at that point and sell it.
Sure. So, talk to me about your background in construction. Like, how did you get all this specialized knowledge in, construction? And it seems like a pretty distant thing from medical device sales. Yeah.
Yeah. So my background before doing this was, if you had asked me to go in Home Depot and look for the glass stretcher, I would have gone to try to look for it. I didn't know which way to swing a hammer, and I lost $40,000 on my third real estate deal ever because I tried to build a home and I tried to GC building that home. I'm not that kind of guy. So flipping a lot of houses, you learn enough to kind of scratch the surface, right? But that's not my talent. My talent was sales. My talent was raising capital. My talent was strategic partnerships, systems, and operations, figuring out who's smarter than me and needs to be in this position. The reality is you can't figure out every single thing. It's like even the general contractor that builds houses, he's not going to know all the little nuances when it comes to air conditioning, installing HVAC units, right? He has to trust and rely on the right subcontractors to do their part in the framing and the HVAC and the plumbing and electrical. Of course, he might know some, scratch the surface, be able to speak some of the lingo, but he's trusting those trades to be able to pull those out. It's the same thing. If you're going to go development, it is very important that you have a really good civil engineer. Not having the right civil engineer cost me $340,000 on one of our developments where he was about 5 inches off on how much dirt we had to remove. And when you got 6, 7, 8 acres of extra dirt that you have to remove, it is not cheap. And so having the right civil engineer that's really good is key. The cities will tell you who is good and who is not good. That planning commission, that is your resource for finding the right civil engineer. So same thing. You're not going to be able to go and take some course and figure out civil engineering and how to design sewer and water. It's not possible. You have to trust the civil engineer to do that, and then you have to hire the right contractors to be able to execute on that development. And luckily, the city's working with you, so they can't. Your civil drawings get approved by the city's civil engineer. So it's a back and forth game, taking these developments and ping-ponging it between your civil that you hire and the city's team until all the kinks have been worked out and the city approves it, and then it gets bumped up to the state for an extra set of eyes. Once they approve it, then you're good to go. So there's a lot of eyeballs on your development during the process. Not to say that mistakes still can't happen. They do, and that's why it's very important to buy the dirt right. And we buy the dirt right by force appreciating the value through that rezone entitlement process.
Wow, that's fascinating. Brandon, talk to us a little bit about your company and your infrastructure and what your team looks like.
Yeah, so we're at a very unique point where what got us to doing 20 million a year is not what's going to get us to doing 100. We were vertically integrated, so we started out with an acquisition arm. It was just me and my partner as we first started. I brought on a director of first impressions to answer the phones. I brought on several project managers, 2 to be exact. We ended up bringing on an assistant project manager to help, a head of construction to manage everybody. I ended up getting my own personal assistant. We then hired a materials manager to be able to manage all the materials throughout that process. And really, we vertically integrated. We created a construction company, HBG Construction, that is a licensed and bonded general contractor. It was managing a lot of the construction and the subcontractors. And then, as you know, I brought on HBG Capital. That was a company that was created as a need to pull our own funds out and really grow and scale. I've got one person that's basically an assistant administrator role in that company. We've probably got 3 or 4 part-time virtual assistants that we work with a lot of the podcasting and graphic design and a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff. So that's really like what the team looked like at its fullest capacity. Maybe nine employees total, I think, is what it amount to with a few part-time people. Now we're actually de-vertically integrating because I see what the team looks like to get to $100 million a year, and I realize that I can get to doing $100 million a year by giving away a bigger slice of the pie to strategic partners. So what does that look like exactly? Well, I am getting rid of the general contracting firm. We know how to do it. We know how to manage it. That's great. We can fall back on that. But if I can bring a builder in that give him a slice of the pie, and he can manage, these 40 homes over here, bring in a developer where he can manage, all these lots over here, and I can just set up strategic partnerships with each development. Not only have I reduced my overhead significantly, but I'm leveraging their time and expertise at what they do, because I guarantee I'm not the best person to build houses out there. I want to find someone who's better at it than me, give them a piece of the pie, be the one that, hey, look, I'll find the deals and I'll provide the capital for the deals. I need you to manage it, and then incentivize them through the right structure to perform and do well on it. That's kind of where we're headed right now.
Sounds like you've built a really good team around you. So talk to me about what kind of goals. So as we sit here recording this today, we're in March of 2024. Do you have a specific? I know you talked about 100 million and growing from 20 million annually to 100 million. Do you have a goal? A goal for this year? I don't know. Maybe that's the goal for this year. Maybe that's a farther out. But do you have any goals for 2024 that are super important to you that you're really leaning into?
We really want to figure out this build-to-rent model. We want to be like you when we grow up, Gibbs. You're already doing the build-to-rent thing. I mean, what we did a poor job of on my end is not holding more assets long-term. So we didn't do a good job of capturing that depreciation. It kind of fell on us personally as partners to go kind of chase those depreciation opportunities. And, we're not getting the big slice of it, right? Because we're just limited partners in the deal. So one of my goals is I want to figure out how to keep a portion of what we're building in-house for the depreciation, and to build an actual portfolio that we can one day sell off. That's probably on one of my number one agendas, is to start holding on more of what we're building. So as far as this year, it's been really difficult due to the debt to get stuff to pencil for build to rent, but ultimately we're trying to get where we're building, 300 units a year, keeping the majority of them, and we've got 1,000 lots or 1,000 units under our control in the land or entitlement process. As far as this year, right now, we've got 42 townhomes that we're selling to Goodall Homes. We've got 74 lots that we're about to develop with a local home builder, not a national. We're trying to do a lot more with the local guys, kind of keep it in the community. And then we've got about 20 homes that we're looking to start here pretty shortly. And then we've got a development up about 45 minutes from Nashville that got approved for 204 homes that will be selling the paper to a developer. So lots of different exit strategies there. We're kind of cherry picking the ones that work best for what we want to do, and then using another exit strategy to disposition that opportunity.
Wow, that's great. Talk to me a little bit about the Nashville market. I think I've told you this before. I think we've talked about it a couple of times, but I've never been to Nashville. I've got a house that I own in Sevierville, Tennessee, which is, Sevierville, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area for people that don't know that. But I've always wanted to go to Nashville, and I've got to make a trip out there, and we can get together and grab a bite to eat or have some coffee or something. But yeah, tell me about the Nashville market. How are things in the market right now, and what do you like about it? What is it that you really love about the Nashville market?
Man, it's booming. We're very blessed to be in a good market. Like I said, I was in medical device sales. Nashville's a healthcare mecca, so it has some big healthcare players like Vanderbilt, Ascension's here. I forget who the other really big hospital is. There's the St. Thomas's here. It's like the people travel from in the Southeast to come to Nashville to get healthcare done. Vanderbilt Children's Hospital is one of the best children's hospitals in the country. So it's gotten a really attractive story for healthcare. But when I got out of healthcare, I realized that it was just a great market to be in for real estate. And so it's kind of funny. One of the premises that we really follow is this concept of follow the money. And so there's 4 types of money. You've got your institutional money, you've got your large corporations, you've got small businesses, and you've got consumers. And if you can be in an area where all 4 are flocking to that, you have a very compelling story for a lot of insulation against any kind of market risk. What does that mean exactly? So let's talk about the institutional money that's coming into Nashville. COVID revealed this environment that everybody knew was there, but made it very evident, which is you've got business-friendly states and you've got non-business-friendly states. So there's a huge migration from non-business friendly states like New York and California to business friendly states like Texas, Florida, and Tennessee. We did not shut everything down. So that made it very attractive for a lot of institutional capital to start coming into the city. How do you know that there's institutional capital coming in? Well, from 2011 to 2020, you had roughly $5 billion of institutional money coming into the city. This is very evident by the skyline, right? If you just look at a city skyline and you count the cranes, that's your evidence of institutional money. Right now, from 2020 to 2024, there's over $5 billion of construction. So what happened within a 9-year period has now been compressed into a 4-year period. That's a lot of additional institutional money coming into the city. If you look at the second source, large corporations, Oracle, Alliance Bernstein, Amazon, Dell, I think Facebook's got like a data center going up in the Gallatin area. These are huge companies that are getting incentivized tax breaks with the local authorities here, the local government, to move here because they know that there are jobs. And there's no income taxes in Tennessee. Huge tax break that you're not seeing from these other states. So there's a lot of large corporations. There's a lot of institutions just pouring money in here. So let's, talk about the small businesses. You can go pick up a copy in any city of the, like the Nashville Business Journal or the Phoenix Business Journal, and you can get a really good vibe on how many small businesses are moving there. What's the commercial leasing market doing? It is on fire here. If you look at what commercial rents are doing and the price appreciation, that tells you that there's a lot of small businesses moving here. And then that fourth, follow the money, right? The consumer. If you look at what home prices have done in this market, and of course it's like that everywhere, but you've seen a huge influx. Nashville's been one of the top 10 fastest growing cities in the United States for the past 6-7 years. And when you got people moving into an area, that means you've got money moving into an area, which means you've got some insulation against any kind of market risk like interest rates or whatever it is that gets thrown at you. So if we can first satisfy that umbrella of protection from a macro perspective, be in the right area, and then be in assets where there's significant supply and demand imbalances like first-time homebuyer housing, then it makes for a very compelling thesis, and that's why we are where we are in Nashville.
I love that. Now, talk to me a little bit about your capital raising experience. I know you mentioned earlier in the show that you had at one point you'd raised $4 to $5 million. How much have you raised now, and let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we've raised to date roughly $14 million since we started roughly 7-8 years ago, a mixture of like debt and equity. It's not all used at the same time. It kind of comes in phases, but really it's started with friends and family. And when you what I really like about development that's a little bit different than multifamily or commercial is there's much quicker turns of capital. And so I think that we were able to grow our capital raising efforts quicker because since we started, we've probably had 7 or 8 turns of people's money, whereas if I'd started in multifamily, it might have only been like 2 turns. And so there's some investors that start out with, 50. I've had some investors start out with, $200,000 and they write a $3 million check, right? Because you've got that relationship, you've got that performance history with them. And so that's been a big factor into us being able to raise additional capital. We're very focused on the customer experience model. I invest my own personal funds in other people's syndications for 2 reasons. One, I know and understand real estate. I like to invest in things that I know and I understand because I know what the risks are. And 2, because I want to see what they're doing really well and where they're dropping the ball, because if they're doing something really well, I want to put that into our customer experience roadmap. And if they're dropping the ball, that's an opportunity for me to differentiate. And so that's really helped me figure out where our gaps and inefficiencies are with what we do, because we want people to feel like they're along for the ride. We want to be exciting. We want them to feel like they're, making an impact in the community, not just, making passive income, which is great, but they're part of something bigger. and they're helping make an impact in these communities that we get to invent. So we're very focused on the whole experience that our investors have, and we raise a lot of capital just by focusing on that one thing there. We can talk about the other things that we do to raise money as well, but
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit. Let's go back to what you mentioned earlier about the turnaround time of these deals. You know, in a traditional, I'm going to call it a traditional value add multifamily deal, you're normally looking at, like a 5-year hold period. And you mentioned earlier that if you if you were doing multifamily, you might have only had 1 or 2 turns over this period of time. What is the typical hold period on a development deal? A common deal that you would do?
Yeah, so it depends on where we're at with it, right? If we're building houses, typically 14 months are left if the home is ready to go. If we're syndicating it, developing and selling the lots, same thing. It's usually 15, 16 months or less. If we're having to develop it and build the homes, and we're going to kind of keep investors in throughout the whole process. In other words, we're not going to like refinance them out a little bit of the development portion when we go vertical. Typically 2 years or less on those types of opportunities.
Okay, so still we're talking about a little over a year, 14, 15 months up to 2 years.
Yep.
So it really is an abbreviated schedule when you compare it to a 5-year hold.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So with your capital raising, what other methods do you have? I know you said you started out with friends and family, but I'm sure at a certain point, you started raising from people that you probably never met before. Mm-hmm. And tell me, how did that happen? Sounds like you get a lot of repeat investors, and it sounds like you probably get a lot of word of mouth referrals as well. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that. How do you grow your investor base, and what is your main focus there? Obviously, if you've got the track record and you're going to get a bunch of word of mouth. I understand that. Mm-hmm. What else do you do to grow that base?
Yeah, so it's not one thing that works. It's kind of like a lot of small things that sort of add up. So go where the eyeballs are. That's the key. Where are the eyeballs right now? Well, you've got thought leaders, gentlemen like yourself. We do a lot of podcast tours where people who don't necessarily, let's say they've got most of their money in multifamily and they want to diversify and they like real estate, right? So we get a lot of business from going on other people's podcasts. We get a lot of business from people who find us on our podcast, Recession Resistant Real Estate Radio. We post every single day on social media with the intent to add value. So we want value add content that's designed to change lives and help people get to where they're wanting to go. Specifically, how can we help people build a legacy, retire, and make an impact using real estate and creating passive income from it? And so those have been really, really instrumental. All those little things add up, and it's, we've got a consistent flow of new investors or new potential investors that sign up, want to learn some more information, and then at some point we usually end up doing business with them in some way, shape, or form.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Brandon. Look, I want to be respectful of your time. I mean, this has been awesome. Getting to catch up with you and hear about what you've been doing in your journey. For folks that do want that listen to the podcast and would like to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, so we've got a ton of free information on our website, hbgcapital.net. That's pronounced hbgcapital.net. If you are somebody who's interested in diversifying into land development, if you're trying to build a legacy and create financial freedom and get passive income from real estate, go to the website. There's a free ebook there called 100 Questions Business Owners Ask Before Investing. I wrote that ebook because I got a call from one of our investors one day that asked the favor if I could speak to one of his friends who lost all his money in a real estate investment. And it became very evident on that call with that investor that he was just very green. He did not know what he was doing. He didn't have access to the resources to make a more informed decision. And as a result, unfortunately, he lost all his money and there was not a whole lot he could do about it. And so I wrote that book with the intention that if I could prevent that from happening to just one other person, it would be worth it. Because questions unlock the answers that you need to make a more informed decision. And in this guy's case, if he had the right questions, he could have better equipped himself to avoid that capital loss. So you can grab that on our website. We've got our own podcast, like I said, Recession Resistant Real Estate Radio. You can find me on all the social media channels as well.
Awesome, Brandon. Look, thank you very much for coming on today. It's been a blast catching up with you. I feel like we could have a very, very long conversation. You just got you're a very, very savvy business person. You built a great business around you, and somebody that I really respect and just super impressed with what you've done, man. So keep up the good work, and it was great having you on. Thanks again.
Hey, it's been a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Go Big with Gib. If you haven't already, go follow us on social media at Gib Irons. We'll see you next time.